The phone buzzed at 3:07 p.m. A single vibration at first, then another, more insistent, as if demanding to be heard. Aria Bennett sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by pastel baby clothes and half-assembled furniture. Her 9-month belly rested like a warm, heavy globe on her thighs. She was folding a soft blue romper, the one with tiny embroidered clouds on the chest, imagining how it would look on her son. His tiny fists curled, his sleepy face pressed against her shoulder. The phone vibrated again. Aria frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone to call, and most people texted her these days anyway. She pushed herself upright with a soft groan, one hand automatically bracing her lower back. When she finally reached the phone, she didn't even check the screen. She hit speaker and placed it on the dresser. "Hello?" The silence on the other end was brief but unnerving. Then a man spoke, his voice firm, official, the kind that instantly rearranges the atmosphere around it. "Is this Mrs. Bennett? Aria Bennett?" Something in his tone made the tiny hairs on Aria's arms stand at attention. "Yes, this is she. This is Officer Grayson with the Tennessee Highway Patrol. There's been an incident regarding your husband, Elias Bennett." The room fell quiet. Even the ticking wall clock seemed to hold its breath. Aria's fingers went numb. "Incident? What do you mean? What happened?" The officer exhaled slowly, a sound that stretched time itself. "He was involved in a car accident on I-24, heading toward Chattanooga. He's alive, Mrs. Bennett. He's been taken to St. Mary's Medical Center for evaluation." Alive. The word hit her like a wave, relief and terror tangled together. But then the officer added, "He wasn't alone." The blue romper slipped from Aria's hands, fluttering soundlessly to the carpet. Not alone. She tried to rationalize. Elias sometimes drove coworkers, maybe a client, maybe someone from the dealership he managed. She swallowed hard. Who was with him?" There was a long pause, longer than before. "We don't have the full report yet. Only that the female passenger was transported as well." Female. Passenger. Aria's vision blurred. "Mrs. Bennett, you need to get to the hospital. They'll brief you once you arrive." The call ended. Aria stood frozen in the nursery she'd spent months creating. A room filled with softness, hope, tiny folded dreams. But now, everything felt wrong. Off balance. Tilted. She grabbed her purse, didn't even lock the door, and hurried into the hallway, her breath coming fast and shallow. In the elevator's mirrored walls, her reflection was a stranger. Pale cheeks, wide, frightened eyes, a belly stretched full and vulnerable. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes as she made her way through the evening traffic, her heart beating in painful, irregular thuds. The officer's words echoed relentlessly. He wasn't alone. By the time she reached St. Mary's, the sky was a dull gray, threatening rain. Inside the ER, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, nurses rushed in and out, and the air smelled of antiseptic and stress. Aria approached the reception desk, gripping the front counter to steady herself. "My husband, Elias Bennett. He was brought in from an accident." The receptionist, a woman with kind hazel eyes and a messy bun, searched the computer. "Yes, Mrs. Bennett. He's in exam room 12. You can—" The woman hesitated, her face tightening. "You can speak with the attending nurse first." Aria forced a nod. As she made her way down the hallway, she felt people glancing at her, at the trembling pregnant woman whose carefully built world might be cracking apart. The nurse she found was in her mid-50s, stern, competent, the kind who had seen everything and carried it quietly. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, "your husband is stable. He has minor injuries, a bruised rib, cuts, concussion symptoms, but he's conscious." A rush of relief made Aria sag against the counter. "And the other person?" she asked. The nurse hesitated, then quietly said, "She's in the next room. Minor injuries." She handed Aria a clipboard. "Sign here for his admission records." But Aria's eyes drifted to the top of the page. Patient, Elias Bennett, room 12. Companion, Mira Collins. Her stomach twisted so violently she thought she might faint. Mira Collins. Her neighbor, apartment 3C. The woman who always seemed cheerful, who brought Arya homemade cinnamon bread 2 weeks ago, who asked about her due date with glowing enthusiasm, who said, "Pregnancy suits you so well, Arya. Elias must be so excited." Mira. The one with the delicate voice, the soft laugh, the yoga mat always tucked under her arm. The one Arya never suspected of anything because suspicion had no place in a life she believed was safe. The clipboard slipped through her fingers and clattered onto the floor. Her vision tunneled. The hallway warped into static. Her knees buckled and the nurse caught her just in time. They eased her into a plastic chair against the wall. Arya stared into nothingness as waves of realization consumed her. Mira Collins had been in the car with Elias, on a highway out of town, in the middle of a workday. Her neighbor, her friend, her husband's mistress. The betrayal was so sharp, so sudden, that her body reacted before her mind did. Her baby kicked, as if sensing danger, and Arya instinctively placed both hands over her stomach, protective and trembling. Everything blurred. The rushed footsteps, the hushed voices, the cold floor under her shoes. Then a doctor approached. A thin man with silver-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm Dr. Patel. Your husband is out of immediate danger." He spoke gently, but his words didn't fully register. "Can I see him?" she asked. Dr. Patel exchanged a quick look with the nurse. "He's sedated, and the other patient is in the same observation bay. Perhaps you should—" "No," Arya said, surprising even herself. "I need to see him now." The doctor nodded and led her toward the green curtain shielding room 12. He pushed it aside. Arya stepped in, breath catching in her throat. 2 beds, side by side. On the right, Elias. His head bandaged, chest rising and falling in slow, unconscious breaths. On the left, Mira. A bandage across her temple, mascara streaked down pale cheeks. Staring blankly at the ceiling until her eyes shifted, met Arya's. The recognition hit like electricity. Mira's face collapsed into panic. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Guilt wasn't what Arya saw. It was fear, raw, animal fear. And suddenly Arya knew. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was something carried, nurtured, hidden in the shadows of her home. Arya stepped deeper into the room, eyes locked on Mira. Her voice was cold steel. He wasn't alone. The words landed like a slap, mirroring the officer's sentence, returning accusation to its source. Mira shrank back, eyes glistening. "Arya, don't say my name," she whispered, slicing through the air. The beep of the heart monitor punctuated the silence. Elias groaned softly, beginning to wake. Arya didn't look at him. Couldn't. His face was a stranger's, one she suddenly didn't know how to love. Her baby shifted inside her. Pain radiated through her back, her ribs. Her body, already stretched thin, felt moments away from breaking. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. There was one more truth that needed to be faced. One more person who deserved to know. Her hands trembling, Arya pulled out her phone. She searched for a number she had only used once. Marcus Collins, Mira's husband. A quiet man. A software engineer who often carried grocery bags for Arya when Elias was working late. A man who trusted his wife. A man who didn't deserve this. Arya stepped into the hallway and leaned her forehead against the cold window. Night was falling outside, brushing the city in shades of blue and shadow. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Arya tasted copper on her tongue. Fear, or adrenaline, or truth. Then, "Hello?" Marcus's voice, warm, calm, unaware of the hurricane seconds away from swallowing his world whole. "Marcus," Arya said softly. "It's Arya, from 2A. A pause. Concern flickered through the phone. "Arya? Is everything okay?" Is it the baby? Her throat tightened. No, she said. It's about Mira. You need to come to St. Mary's Hospital, immediately. Silence. Marcus breathed once. Sharp. Controlled. The kind of breath a man takes when he already knows the truth but hopes he's wrong. I'm on my way, he said. No questions. No confusion. No denial. Just inevitability. Arya lowered the phone, her body suddenly heavy. The baby kicked softly as if comforting her. She closed her eyes, then opened them. This was only the beginning. Time at the hospital didn't move forward in seconds and minutes anymore. It stretched, thickened. Arya sat in the same plastic chair, fingers woven protectively over her belly, watching nurses pass, listening to distant sobs and the constant undertone of beeping monitors. She wasn't sure how long had passed when she finally saw him. Marcus Collins appeared at the far end of the hallway, walking with a kind of controlled urgency. He wasn't running. He wasn't falling apart. But his shoulders were too stiff, his jaw too tight, his eyes too focused for this to be anything but a crisis. His gaze swept the corridor once, left, right, until it landed on her. For a second, their eyes locked. The last time they'd spoken had been a casual Sunday in the stairwell, arms full of grocery bags, laughing about the building's unreliable elevator. Back then, his smile had been easy. Tonight, there was nothing easy left in him. He approached. Arya. His voice was low, roughened. Where is she? The question wasn't what happened. It was where is she? Deep down, he already knew enough. Arya rose carefully, one hand on her belly. They're in there, she said quietly, nodding toward the green curtain. They? He repeated. She held his gaze. Elias and Mira, same room. Something broke in his eyes then. Not loudly, not dramatically, but like glass cracking under pressure. He didn't yell. He didn't ask any more questions. Marcus walked toward the curtain with the deliberate steps of a man heading straight into the epicenter of an explosion he couldn't escape. Arya followed, stopping just a step behind him as he pulled the curtain aside. The scene hadn't changed. Elias lay half reclined, eyes unfocused but open now, the sedative wearing off. Mira sat upright, shoulders curved forward, fingers twisted in the thin hospital blanket. She looked up first, expecting maybe a nurse, maybe Arya alone. But when she saw Marcus, all the color drained from her face. Marcus, she choked out. His jaw clenched so tight a vein pulsed in his neck. He didn't walk all the way in at first. He just stood at the boundary of the curtain, between the inside and outside of their shared life. His gaze moved from Mira to Elias, from Elias to Mira. The beds, the monitors, the proximity. The story wrote itself without anyone saying a word. What is this? He asked finally. His voice was quiet. Not a shout, not a roar, just a controlled blade. It wasn't a question about the accident. It was about this. The two of them together, out of town, in the same car, now in the same room. Mira's eyes filled with tears. It's not... Marcus, please, it's not what it looks like. The words were so old, so worn, they sounded almost obscene. Marcus let out a short, humorless breath. He stepped inside now, crossing that invisible threshold. You were in a car, he said, each word precise. On a highway out of the city, with the neighbor's husband. Tell me how exactly that is not what it looks like. Elias flinched. His gaze flicked to Arya, searching, pleading, maybe hoping to find some softness left in her. He found none. Marcus, listen. Elias began, voice shaky, slipping instinctively into the charming tone he used with difficult clients. Man to man, this was a mistake, all right? A mistake, Marcus repeated slowly, as if testing the word on his tongue. No. Forgetting your wedding anniversary is a mistake. Getting in a car with my wife out of town while your pregnant wife is at home folding baby clothes, That's not a mistake, Elias. That's a decision. The silence that followed was so dense Arya could hear her own heartbeat, loud and insistent in her ears. The baby shifted within her, pressing against her ribs. Mira began to cry in earnest now, an ugly, gasping sob. Marcus, please. We didn't mean for this to happen. It started small and then… I was going to tell you, I swear I was… Tell me what? His eyes flashed. That you were cheating on me with our neighbor? Or were you waiting for him to leave his pregnant wife first so the story would sound more romantic? The mention of Arya's pregnancy hung in the air like a verdict. Elias swallowed, looking at Arya again. Arya, please, just let me explain. I messed up, okay? But it's not… Don't. She cut in softly. Her voice was low, but it carried. Don't say it's not what I think. It's exactly what I think. It's just worse than I imagined. Mira's sobs quieted into hiccuping breaths. Her hands, which had been trembling wildly, moved without thinking. Down, resting over her lower abdomen. Arya's eyes sharpened, following the gesture. It was subtle. If she hadn't spent months instinctively touching her own belly that way, absently, protectively, she might have missed it. But she didn't miss it. The way Mira's fingers curled, the way her shoulders hunched inward, the way she drew the blanket slightly higher, not over her chest, but over her stomach. A cold suspicion slid through Arya, slow and paralyzing. Her mind leaped back. Mira's unusual questions about morning sickness months ago. Her odd fascination with Arya's first trimester fatigue. The way she'd casually brought up baby names once in the elevator, laughing it off as just curious. At the time, Arya had taken it as normal neighborly interest. Now it all clicked into place like the last piece of a cruel puzzle. Her throat went dry. Mira's hands stayed firmly on her stomach. Marcus hadn't noticed. His gaze was fixed on her face, not on the small subtleties of her body. His hurt was still busy trying to process the affair, trapped at that awful surface level where everything was raw and loud. Why? He asked suddenly. The single word shattered in the air between them. His voice broke on it. Why him? Why this? Mira pressed her hands tighter against her abdomen, as if bracing herself from the inside. I don't know, she whispered. The lie twisted as it came out. I felt alone. You were busy all the time. You were distant, and Elias, Stop! Marcus didn't raise his voice, but the command hit with more force than a shout. His eyes had gone strange, too bright, too clear. You don't get to rewrite the last few years just because you got caught in the wrong bed, he said. I loved you. I showed up. Maybe not perfectly, but I did. You wanted… what? Excitement? Attention? Mira's tears streamed down her cheeks. It was a weakness, she murmured. A stupid, stupid weakness. Arya stood at the edge of the room, one hand braced on the doorframe. She felt like she was watching someone else's life, some late-night drama she never chose to stream. Except the ache in her lower back was real. The tightness in her chest was real. The way her baby reacted to every spike in her heart rate was real. Her life was happening whether she wanted this scene or not. She took a slow breath. Marcus. He turned to her, and in his eyes she saw something she hadn't expected. Not anger at her for dragging him into this, but gratitude. Somewhere beneath the shards of humiliation, he understood that she had given him the truth. Yes? She nodded once toward Mira's stomach. Have you asked her if there's… more? He frowned, confused, and followed her gaze. Mira stiffened. Her fingers, which rested on her belly, twitched as if burned. More what? Marcus demanded. His eyes flicked from Mira's hands to her face. Mira? She hesitated, and that hesitation was an answer all its own. Are you… His voice dropped to a whisper. Are you pregnant? The room shrank. All the air seemed to vanish at once. Mira closed her eyes, a fresh wave of tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, she breathed, barely audible. Yes, I am. Marcus stared at her as if she had spoken a different language. His mouth opened, then closed again. Elias went completely still in his bed, the blood draining from his face. Arya's legs threatened to give out. How long? Marcus asked. How long have you known? 8 weeks, she whispered. I was going to tell you, I didn't know how, and then everything kept getting complicated And whose is it? The question dropped like a stone into the room. Mira recoiled. Her hand flew up to her mouth. Marcus, how can you even— How can I not? He shot back. His voice finally rose, cracking like a whip. You're carrying a child while sleeping with another man, and I'm supposed to just take your word for it that it's mine? She sobbed. It's yours, she insisted. It is. We were trying, remember? We talked about this. We wanted this. But you didn't tell me, he said hollowly. You didn't tell me when you found out. You're telling me here. He glanced at the monitor, the IV, the 2 beds, the evidence. Now, because you're afraid I'll leave. Elias seemed to wake from a daze, panic flickering in his eyes. Mira, he murmured. You didn't tell me either. She turned her head sharply, glaring at him through tears. I didn't owe you anything, she snapped, a flash of anger cutting through the fear. You were never going to leave her. She jerked her chin toward Arya. This was just— Entertainment? Arya said quietly. Mira's words tangled and died. The monitor beeped steadily in the background, a cold metronome ticking away the last seconds of 2 marriages. Marcus straightened slowly, something settling over his features. Not calm, exactly, but clarity. Fine, he said at last. You say the baby is mine? Then we'll prove it. Prenatal testing, DNA, science doesn't lie. You do. Marcus, please, Mira sobbed. Don't do this. Don't leave me. I made a mistake. I was scared. I felt invisible. He shook his head once. You weren't invisible, he said quietly. You were ungrateful. He looked at Elias. You? I don't need anything from you. My lawyer will handle the rest. But let me say this, man to man. You shook my hand. You joked with me in the hallway. You asked how work was going while you were sleeping with my wife and leaving your pregnant wife at home. You're not a man to me. You're a warning. Elias had no reply. His eyes dropped, shame pinning him to the bed harder than any restraint. Marcus turned back to Arya. His anger softened a fraction. I'm sorry you found out this way, he said. You didn't deserve this. Neither did you, she wanted to say. Out loud, she simply nodded. We deserve the truth, she replied. And now we have it. Marcus inhaled once, deeply, as if breathing in the last of the life he'd known before entering this room. It's over, Mira, he said. I'll handle my responsibilities as a father if the test confirms it. But as your husband? He shook his head slowly. We're done. She reached toward him, but he stepped back. For a second, she hung there, arms stretched out, fingers grasping at empty air. Then her hand fell limp in her lap. He walked out, pushing past the curtain without another word. This time, he didn't look back. Arya watched him go, feeling an ache in her chest that was not romantic, not longing, just the ache of shared devastation. 2 strangers now bound forever by the same explosion. Elias whispered her name again. Arya, please, just listen. I can fix this, we can fix this. It doesn't have to be the end. She turned to him, finally letting her eyes rest on his face. The face she had loved. The face she thought she knew. There were bruises across his cheekbone, a faint cut on his lip. But it wasn't the injuries that made him look different. It was the cowardice. Fix what? She asked quietly. The trust? The respect? The The safety I thought I had with you? He opened his mouth, closed it again. You didn't just cheat, she continued. You brought her into our home, into our elevator, into our conversations. You let her touch my belly, talk about our baby while you were sneaking around with her. You sat next to me on the couch at night knowing you had kissed her that day. He flinched. Arya, please. No, she said. Her voice was very calm now, calmer than she felt. You destroyed our family, and you did it like it was nothing, like our son was an afterthought. His eyes filled with tears. Don't say that, please. He's my son. I love him already. Then you should have loved him enough not to risk everything before he even got here, she replied. There was nothing more to say. Not now. Arya stepped backward out of the room, out from between the two beds filled with lies. She didn't look at Mira. She didn't look back at Elias. She walked down the hallway, each step punctuated by the dull ache in her lower back and the steady thump of her baby's movement. When she reached the automatic glass doors, the cool evening air hit her face like a slap. She took a long, slow breath. For the first time since the call, she realized something. She wasn't just leaving a hospital. She was crossing a line. There would be a before this day, and there would be an after. And she refused to let the after be defined by what they had done to her. Arya didn't go home right away. Not yet. Not while her pulse was still echoing through her ribs like a marching drum. Not while her baby shifted uneasily inside her belly, sensing the storm swirling around them both. She stopped outside the hospital doors under the pale glow of a flickering street lamp. The night air was cool and sharp, burning her lungs just enough to remind her she was still alive. Still thinking. Still in control of something. Even if that something was only her own breath. Her legs felt heavy, as if each step she had taken since the moment she saw that accident report had drained years of strength from her bones. She sat down slowly on a nearby concrete bench, the cold biting through her clothes, but she welcomed it. Cold meant clarity. Cold meant she wasn't going to dissolve into panic or fall apart in front of the world. Her phone buzzed with a call. Elias. She stared at the screen until it went silent. Then it buzzed again. She turned the phone face down on the bench and let it ring. She wasn't ready. Not to yell. Not to cry. Not to listen to excuses crafted from cowardice. She pressed a hand to her belly. The baby pushed back gently, a small foot sliding under her ribs. It's okay, she whispered. We're okay. It wasn't true yet, but it would be. She didn't know how long she sat there. Minutes, hours, until a nurse approached, her sneakers squeaking softly against the pavement. Mrs. Bennett, are you all right? You shouldn't be outside in the cold this long. Arya blinked, coming back to herself. I'll leave soon. I just needed air. The nurse hesitated. Her expression softened. Your husband is awake now. He keeps asking for you. Arya almost laughed. A hollow sound, humorless and exhausted. Asking for her, like she was his comfort, his anchor. As if he had not been the one steering their life off the edge of a cliff. Please tell him I've gone home, she said. The nurse nodded slowly, uncertain but respectful. And the other patient's husband returned, she added, lowering her voice. They're talking to one of the social workers now. Arya's heart clenched, not with sympathy, but with a strange, cold curiosity. Marcus had gone back. He hadn't abandoned the situation entirely. Maybe out of duty. Maybe to face the truth clearly rather than let it bleed in the shadows. Or maybe because he deserved answers from the woman who had turned his life into a battlefield. Arya stood, steadier now. No, she said. I'm not leaving yet. Her instincts pulled her back inside. Not toward Elias, not toward Mira, but toward whatever revelation was unfolding behind the frosted glass pane near the social services office. She moved quietly, keeping a distance, staying in the shadows of the corridor. And through the large observation window, she saw them. Marcus sat forward in an uncomfortable plastic chair, elbows on his knees, hands pressed together as if holding himself upright by sheer force of will. Mira sat across from him, crying into her hands, voice muffled. Between them, a weary-looking social worker leaned forward, speaking carefully, trying to mediate something that no therapist or hospital staff could fix. Arya couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language. Mira's shoulders shook. Marcus's posture was rigid, carved in stone. His eyes didn't move from his wife, but the look he gave her was not loving, not even angry. It was the hollow gaze of a man who had nothing left to lose. Arya watched until the social worker left the room for paperwork. And in that brief silence, Mira finally spoke in a trembling voice that carried just enough for Arya to faintly hear. "I didn't love him," Mira whispered, hands shaking. "It wasn't about him. It was just something I did because I felt trapped. I felt unseen. I felt—" "You felt like hurting the only person who ever stood by you," Marcus interrupted, voice quiet but razor sharp. He leaned back, staring at her with an expression that held exhaustion more than rage. Mira shook her head. "No, I didn't want to hurt you, Marcus. I don't know why I did this. It was a mistake, a terrible one. And I swear to you the baby is yours. I swear it." Marcus's jaw ticked. "You swore to me you were faithful too," he said softly. "So forgive me if your vows don't land the same way anymore." His words were broken, but not weak. Not anymore. Arya stepped away from the window then, not because she didn't want to see more, but because she had seen enough. It was over for them, just as it was over for her and Elias. She left the hallway without waiting for the conclusion. She knew how this story ended, not with reconciliation, but with paperwork and long silences and divided closets. And as she walked toward her car, something inside her shifted. A quiet click, like a lock sliding into place. A decision forming in the deepest part of her. She was done with Elias. Done with excuses. Done with betrayal disguised as imperfection. Done with a life where she was expected to tolerate wounds as part of being a wife. She would not raise her son in a house built on lies. He deserved better. And so did she. The next morning, Arya didn't cry. Not when she woke up in a bed that felt too big, too cold, too quiet. Not when she walked into the nursery and saw the blue romper still lying on the floor where she'd dropped it. Not when she made herself a cup of tea with shaking hands. She was hollow, yes. Emptied out. But in that hollow space, something new had room to grow. Resolve. A plan. A future. Her first call was to a lawyer. Her second call was to a real estate agent. Her third call was to a moving company. She didn't give herself time to think, or doubt, or reconsider. She moved like a woman managing a crisis she had seen coming for years, even if she only recognized the signs now. Boxes were delivered that afternoon. She packed with clinical precision. Kitchen items together, baby supplies in separate bins labeled in neat handwriting, personal items sorted ruthlessly into keep, discard, or donate piles. Her wedding photos went straight into the trash. Not even the donation bin. Not even a box. Straight into the garbage. By the time Elias was discharged and took a cab home, the apartment was already half empty. When he opened the door, expecting tears or shouting or a raw confrontation, he found instead silence. Bare walls, boxes stacked neatly, closets empty, and on the coffee table, a single manila envelope. His name written in Arya's elegant, steady handwriting. Inside, a copy of the accident report. The phrases excessive speed, wet pavement, and 2 occupants underlined with stark, undeniable clarity. A print of the latest ultrasound. Their son's tiny profile captured mid-turn, perfect and unaware. A single note, handwritten on a plain white card. "While you were lying, I learned to live." No signature. She didn't owe him one. Elias sank to the floor, clutching the note with shaking hands, the magnitude of his loss crushing him under its full weight. But Arya wasn't there to see it. While Elias unraveled, Arya rebuilt. She found a small rental house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in East Nashville. 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, a sunlit kitchen. Nothing fancy, but peaceful. Hers, only hers. She set up the crib alone, painted the nursery a soft slate blue, folded every onesie with care, placed a rocking chair near the window where sunlight pooled gently on the floor. For the first time in her life, she felt strong, untethered, alive. Elias's calls went unanswered, then blocked. The only time she spoke his name was with her lawyer. She didn't look back. Word traveled slowly but inevitably. Mira was discharged 2 days later. Marcus picked her up only long enough to hand her divorce documents and demand a prenatal DNA test. 2 weeks later, the results came in. The baby was his. But that didn't heal anything. Marcus agreed to co-parent, but the marriage was over. Mira, shunned by neighbors, abandoned by her lover, and rejected by her husband, began her pregnancy alone, held up only by the weight of her own choices. Elias spiraled. His job performance dropped. His charm was gone. His home felt like a mausoleum of everything he'd destroyed. He called Arya from blocked numbers that she no longer answered. He wrote long texts that disappeared into the void. He begged her, apologized, swore, cried, collapsed. Arya didn't respond. Not because she wasn't hurting, but because she was healing. And healing demanded space. 3 weeks after the accident, on a quiet Saturday morning, her doorbell rang. Arya froze. Her heart stuttered in her chest. She peeked through the peephole. Not Elias. Marcus. She opened the door cautiously. He looked tired, thinner, older, but steadier than the last time she'd seen him. There was something new in his expression. Resolve, maybe. Or acceptance. Or something deeper. I didn't come to bother you, he said softly. I just needed to give you this. He handed her a large envelope. What is it? She asked. A copy of the prenatal test, he said. And something else. A proposal. From me and my lawyers. Arya blinked in confusion. Marcus, I don't understand. He exhaled slowly. It's simple, really, he said, eyes drifting to her belly. My son is going to be born into a broken home because of what your husband did. He looked up at her. Your son will grow up without a father present for the same reason. The statement was not cruel, not accusatory, just painfully true. I can't fix what happened to my marriage, he continued quietly, voice steady despite the weight behind it. But maybe I can help with the aftermath of yours. Arya's breath caught. Marcus, what are you saying? He met her eyes, unwavering. I don't want to replace his father. I know I'm not that. And I'm not asking for anything romantic. But I can be there. Her heart stumbled. For what? She whispered. For him, he said simply. And for yours. Our sons. They're innocent. They'll be connected forever because of the mess our spouses made. He paused. They could grow up together, as brothers, or something close. Her throat tightened. Emotion hit her like a quiet tidal wave. Marcus, you don't have to answer now. He stepped back. Just think about it. It's not pity. It's responsibility, and maybe a chance for something good to grow out of everything they ruined. He turned to leave. Halfway down the steps, he paused. One last sentence drifted back to her. We deserve to build something better than what they left us with. And then he walked away, leaving Arya standing in the doorway, breath unsteady, heart trembling with a feeling she hadn't expected. Hope. For the next week, Arya lived in a strange, quiet limbo. Not peace. Peace required stillness, and her mind was anything but still. Not chaos either. Chaos was loud, messy, impossible to ignore. Her world had become something in between. Soft, steady, deliberate. She moved slowly, intentionally, as if her body understood what her mind was still learning. She was rebuilding, not collapsing. She read through Marcus's proposal multiple times. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't intrusive. It wasn't even particularly emotional. It was practical, human, thoughtful. A shared custody arrangement. Not over her baby, but over the relationship the boys would eventually share. A long-term vision in which both children would grow up knowing stability, knowing male guidance, knowing a version of family that wasn't defined by betrayal. It was bizarre, unexpected, unconventional, and yet it made sense in a way nothing else had since the accident. Arya didn't answer right away. She let the decision simmer in her chest, pacing slowly across the nursery each evening, folding and refolding baby clothes, her hands trailing over the edge of the crib. Every time her son kicked, she told herself the same thing. I'm building a world for you. A good one. She didn't think about Elias unless forced to. The lawyers handled everything. He had tried again and again to reach her, leaving voicemails thick with tears, anger, promises, apologies. She didn't listen anymore. She deleted them automatically. Her heart had already absorbed the truth. A man who could betray her while she carried his child would betray her again, and again, and again. She would not rebuild on broken foundation. On a cold Wednesday morning, the day her life split into a before and after permanently, Arya woke to a sharp pain rolling across her lower back. Not the usual ache, not the slow pressure she'd grown used to. This was deeper, lower, insistent. She breathed in slowly, and then the next wave hit, sharper, stronger. Her water hadn't broken, and yet she knew her son was coming. She paced the living room, bracing herself against the counter, timing contractions on her phone. They tightened quickly, too quickly. She called her neighbor to take her to the hospital. Someone new, someone kind, someone safe. And within 20 minutes, she was in a car, gripping the door handle, breathing through the pain. At St. Mary's, nurses rushed her into a room, the familiar fluorescent lights flickering above her, the same scent of antiseptic filling her lungs. But this time, she wasn't crumbling from betrayal. She was giving life. Her labor was long, exhausting. Hours blurred into each other, contractions cresting like waves that crushed her breath and then receded, leaving her drenched in sweat and determination. And finally, at 4:42 p.m., her son arrived, red-faced, tiny fists curled tight, lungs strong and loud enough to shake her soul. He cried. She cried. The whole room softened around the sound. The nurse placed him on her chest. Warm, small, real. "Hello," she whispered, voice cracking. "Hello, my love." His eyes blinked at her through exhaustion and instinct. And in that moment, she knew with absolute certainty. She could do this without Elias. She could do anything without him. When she was discharged 2 days later, the nurse pushed her wheelchair to the hospital entrance, the infant carrier secured carefully in her lap. She stood slowly, adjusting her coat, bundling her son close to her chest. 2 bouquets of flowers sat outside her apartment door when she returned home. The first was extravagant, a tall display of roses and lilies, wrapped in glossy paper with a bow so large it nearly hid the card. The card read, "Congratulations on our son. Please forgive me." Elias Arya didn't even bring the bouquet inside. She dropped it directly into the building's trash chute. She didn't read the rest of the card. The second bouquet was simple. Wildflowers, hand-picked and uneven, tied with twine instead of ribbon. The card was handwritten, steady and sincere. "Welcome to the world, little man. Your brother can't wait to meet you. Marcus." Arya pressed the card to her chest, tears pricking behind her eyes. Not because she loved him, not in that way, but because he understood something Elias never had. Family was built through integrity, not DNA. She placed the wildflowers in a jar on her kitchen table, the sunlight catching on the petals. And she knew. Her decision was made. Weeks passed. Her world settled into a gentle rhythm. Feedings, naps, pediatric appointments. Quiet mornings with warm coffee and the soft sound of baby coos. Marcus visited once a week at first, never uninvited, never overstepping. He brought baby clothes sometimes, diapers other times, but mostly he brought presents, the calm, steady, reliable kind. Some nights he sat on the couch across from her while their boys slept, hers in the bassinet, his unborn but very real in paperwork and planning. And they talked. Not about love, not about betrayal, about structure, routine, values, what children needed, what they both lacked growing up, what they wanted to build now. And in those quiet, late-night conversations, Arya realized something profound. Healing wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft, slow, built in tiny, steady pieces with someone who understood your pain without being the source of it. Elias called less and less as the divorce progressed. Her silence had become its own answer. His messages shifted from desperate to resigned. One night, he sent a final text. "I'll always love you. I'm sorry. Please tell him I love him." She didn't reply. Her son would know love, real love, from people who didn't fracture the world he was born into. The day she signed the divorce papers, Marcus accompanied her, not holding her hand, not standing too close, just there. A steady presence, a witness to her freedom. When she walked out of the courthouse, baby carrier in one hand, papers in the other, the sun broke through the clouds overhead. Marcus looked at her. "Feels different, doesn't it?" She exhaled deeply. "It feels clean," she said. "Like breathing air that doesn't hurt." He nodded, eyes soft. "You deserve that." Her heart lifted, not romantically, but gratefully, openly. Then she asked him the question that sealed their new beginning. "Marcus, would you like to hold him?" Marcus froze, just for a moment, his breath catching. Then he nodded and reached out with steady hands. He held the baby with a tenderness that surprised them both. Arya watched, her chest warm. Not because she was falling in love, but because something was growing here. Something that wasn't romantic yet wasn't platonic. Something human, something possible. A family. Not the one she expected, not the one she married into, but the one she chose. The one that rose from the ashes of betrayal. The one built out of truth and resilience. The one made not by blood, but by intention. Her revenge wasn't destruction. It wasn't screaming or punishment or watching Elias suffer. Her revenge was simpler, braver, more powerful. She chose to live fully, freely, unapologetically. And she built a future Elias would never again be allowed to touch. Spring settled into East Nashville slowly, warming the sidewalks, brightening the mornings, and softening the shadows in Arya's little rental house. Her baby, named Isaac, grew quickly, strong legs, wide brown eyes, a curious gaze that followed every sound, every light, every new face. And one face he learned early, almost naturally, was Marcus's. Marcus visited often but never unannounced. He brought gentle steadiness with him, never taking over, never pushing, simply sharing the quiet space Arya was building for her son. Sometimes he held Isaac while Arya cooked dinner. Sometimes he rocked the baby to sleep while she folded laundry. Sometimes they sat on the porch in silence, watching the neighborhood wind down under the warm dusk sky. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. Not exactly. It was something deeper. A coexistence of trust between two people who had walked through hell and come out holding only the essential parts of themselves. Arya couldn't help but notice something every time Marcus was near Isaac. The baby relaxed. His breathing slowed. He leaned into Marcus's chest like it was a place he already recognized. Maybe babies sense the good in people before adults learn to hide it. Meanwhile, the world Arya left behind continued to collapse without her. Mira gave birth 2 months later, alone. Marcus was there for the baby, yes, fulfilling his obligations with unwavering dignity. But for Mira, he never went back. Not once. She moved out of their old apartment and into her sister's basement in Knoxville, surrounded by cardboard boxes and regrets. The glow she once had, the bright, airy yoga instructor warmth, was gone, replaced by a tiredness that darkened her features. Her own betrayal had become her prison. Elias, on the other hand, crumbled slowly. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but piece by piece, his life eroding under the weight of guilt and isolation. He became a ghost at work. No one trusted him the way they used to. His easy charisma had dried up. He sold fewer cars, showed up late, left early. Colleagues whispered behind his back. Not about the accident, but about the aftermath. The wife who left overnight. The apartment stripped bare. The baby he never saw. His therapist suggested he reach out with patience, not pressure. But Arya remained unshakably silent. He sent gifts. A teddy bear. A silver bracelet. A baby blanket with Isaac's initials. All returned unopened by Arya's attorney. Eventually, Elias stopped trying. He didn't know how to rebuild a life without her. And he didn't know how to be a father without the woman he had betrayed beyond forgiveness. Truthfully, he had lost the privilege the moment he chose another woman over the family Arya carried inside her. When Isaac was 4 months old, Arya finally accepted Marcus's invitation to visit a quiet lake house just outside the city, a place he'd inherited from his grandfather, untouched, peaceful, surrounded by tall pines and soft wind. It wasn't a date. It wasn't a declaration. It was simply a moment of rest, a moment she deserved. She placed Isaac in his car seat, packed a small bag, and drove the winding road with the windows cracked open, letting the warm air brush against her skin. When she arrived, Marcus stepped onto the porch holding 2 mugs of tea. One herbal, safe for nursing mothers, just the way she liked it. "You made it," he said softly. Arya smiled. Not forced, not polite, but genuinely, fully, easily. "I needed fresh air," she admitted. "And quiet, and—" She looked down at Isaac, sleeping peacefully. Something different. Marcus's gaze softened. "You deserve different," he said. "You deserve better." She didn't blush. She didn't look away. She simply breathed. For the first time in months, she felt her shoulders lower, tension unclenching in places she didn't realize had been tight. They spent the afternoon on the porch. Marcus with a book. Arya rocking Isaac gently. Birds flitted through the branches. Wind rustled through the grass. And somewhere in the simplicity of it all, Arya realized something. She wasn't waiting for life to begin again. It already had. And the person sitting across from her, calm, steady, kind, was part of that rebirth. 2 years passed, filled with tiny milestones, quiet mornings, shared responsibilities, and a slow-growing closeness that neither of them rushed. In those 2 years, Isaac learned to walk. First steps taken right into Marcus's arms. Marcus's son, Jaden, born from Mira, began visiting on weekends. Arya welcomed him without hesitation. The boys grew like siblings, their laughter echoing through the house like healing in motion. Mira faded further into the background, overwhelmed by single motherhood and the consequences of her choices. She saw Jaden, yes, but irregularly, inconsistently, leaving most of the emotional labor to Marcus. Elias moved out of the city entirely, unable to stand the reminders of the life he destroyed. He requested visitation rights once, but after seeing Isaac from a distance, a child who didn't recognize him, he broke apart and never asked again. Arya didn't hate him. She didn't wish him harm. She simply no longer thought of him. Her energy belonged to better places. When Isaac was 3 years old, Marcus arrived at Arya's door on a warm summer evening. The boys played in the living room, toy cars scattered everywhere. Arya was washing dishes, hair tied loosely, humming under her breath. Marcus stepped inside quietly, holding a small envelope. "This came today," he said and handed it to her. Arya dried her hands and opened it. Inside, the final document confirming their unique family arrangement, legally secure and official. Isaac and Jaden were recognized as co-guardians in case of emergency, ensuring that no matter what happened, their bond and stability would remain intact. Arya swallowed a lump in her throat. "It feels real now," she whispered. Marcus nodded. "It always was," he said softly. "But now the world knows it too." She looked up at him. Really looked. At the man who had stepped into the cracks of her broken life and lit lanterns in every dark corner. At the man who had never asked for more than what she was comfortable giving. At the man who had shown her a version of family built on intention, not obligation. And something warm, gentle, steady rose in her chest. "Marcus." She hesitated, the words fragile. "Thank you for not giving up on whatever this is." He met her gaze, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "I wasn't trying to build something romantic," he admitted. "I was trying to build something honest." She smiled, a slow, real smile. "And did you?" He swallowed. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think we did." And though neither of them said it, though the moment didn't need dramatic music or confessions, there was something there. A beginning. Not the frantic, reckless kind that destroys lives. The grounded kind that rebuilds them. A future quietly waiting. 3 months later, Arya posted her first story back on her channel. Her voice was firm, warm, powerful. Her narrative ended with a line that felt like a thesis for the woman she had become. The greatest revenge isn't hurting the person who broke you. The greatest revenge is living a life so full, so peaceful, and so beautifully rebuilt that their presence becomes irrelevant. She uploaded the video, sat back, and felt her entire past finally close like a book on the last page. Isaac ran into the room, laughing. Jaden chased behind him. Marcus followed, smiling, breathless from playing with the boys. Arya looked at them. This unusual, imperfect, miraculous family, and felt something bloom in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. Not revenge, not victory. Freedom, hope, and home.